Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. Again, I am your host, DC Radical One, and you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical, the numeral one. That's dc.radical, the numeral one. Also, you can currently follow me on Twitter at DC underscore radical underscore ONE. That's DC underscore radical underscore ONE. Now, today's topic is a topic that I actually meant to talk about a while ago. But as things progress with this whole pandemic and some of the other things that took place, it took a back burner. But of course, timing is everything. And of course, as we are now in the time of protest and the rise of Black Lives Matter, this suddenly becomes a relevant topic again. And it's always been a relevant topic, but it's a topic that is needed to be discussed by our people, because we really don't discuss this topic. And it's become a taboo subject. And no man is, if you let people tell it, no man is qualified to discuss it. And no woman will discuss it in a negative light. And if she does, she gets vilified and removed from the sisterhood, if you will. And so today we're going to talk about Black feminism, white supremacy's fifth column. And the definition of a fifth column basically means a hidden force within an opposing force, which can disrupt and destroy that force. It's really a military term, and I'll give you the definition. It says, one of the definitions is a group of agents who attempt to undermine a nation's solidarity from within. Also, a fifth column is any group of people who undermine a larger group from within, usually in favor of an enemy group or nation. The activities of a fifth column can be overt or clandestine. Forces gathered in secret can mobilize openly to assist, in external attack. Also, fifth column definition, a group of secret sympathizers or supporters of an enemy that engage in espionage or sabotage within defense lines or national borders. And so, as we look at these definitions and as we progress with this discussion, and I won't get as deep into this discussion as I can because I have actually done a lecture on this that goes deeper, and I'm actually going to do that. I plan to do that lecture in the future with the video documentation and transcripts and things like that. And so this is like almost like a preview, if you will, of that lecture. This will not go as in depth because this is formatted for radio. But we see by looking at the definitions of a fifth column, as we progress and we look at the history of feminism, we'll understand that indeed Black feminism falls under the definition of a fifth column and fits it perfectly as I have read the definitions previously. Now, my my first experiences with Black feminists came via Twitter. And this is right before, actually, no, it was actually the time where I recognized what they were. I started to understand the ideology. I realized that this was a movement amongst our women, was actually the Trayvon Martin case. This is what's so interesting about it. And remember last week, we talked about Black Lives Matter. We talked about the exploitation of the deaths of Black men to gain the popularity of Black Lives Matter and how they subvert the movement from within. Well, this goes right along with that. And this is my personal experience, but it's interesting because it all comes together. So when Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman, and I see Philly E Babe is here, BB48 sister. Glad that you are here. When Trayvon Martin was murdered, before we knew who Trayvon Martin was, I was on Twitter and there was a sister on Twitter who was talking about there was a boy that had been murdered. They had his body in the police station or the morgue or whatever in Florida, and they just holding them there and they won't release the body, and they haven't contacted the parents and this and this and that. And she was saying, pleading for people to, call the police station and let them know to do something and so forth, so on. Now, this is before we knew who it was, right? And so what was interesting is I'll be honest, I followed the sister because I saw she had locks, chocolate sister, attractive. I think she had like aunt ring or something on. So she had the look of a sister that was conscious. I was not familiar with Black feminism at the time. So I was just looking for people to follow on Twitter. And that's how I ended up following her. And then a few months later, the Trayvon thing happens. She makes this plea for us to call the police, right? Now you're going to say, okay, where's the feminism part come in at? This is where the feminism part comes in. This sister was a follower or friend or whatever you want to call it with Cola Booth, the Negro feminist who's, I believe, from East Africa. And Cola Booth told her, stop advocating for this boy because when he grows up to be a man, he's going to oppress you. Now, understand this boy was Trayvon Martin, but we didn't know it. And the sister responded, I know, but it hurts because of what they did to him. So she had, even without knowing Trayvon, had emotionally bonded because of the murder of a child, appealed to her femininity. But the feminist told her to suppress that because the boy would become a man and that the man would go on to oppress her. That's what Cola Booth said. Now, this, of course, was 8-9 years ago. You probably can't even find these tweets, but I saw it. I was there. I remember it. Right? So that became my understanding of the psychology. The brother said, what? Yeah, brother. This is actual fact. That's when I begin to see and understand the psychology of the feminists. And what's so deep is, maybe, I guess, a year or so later, the same Cola Booth who has this long story, I think she's supposed to be a model or something. She claims to have been kidnapped and held by bin Laden and so forth, so on. But she hates Black men. She wasn't kidnapped and held by brothers. She claimed to be kidnapped and held by bin Laden, an Arab. She goes on and marries a small hat. And you'll see as we get a little bit deeper into this why that's relevant. Because what we're going to look at, we're going to go into a little bit of the history of feminism, who was behind it, who was propped up and made leaders and so forth, so on. And then you'll see the relevance of Cola Booth, who told this sister not to care about Trayvon Martin before we knew who Trayvon Martin was, told why she ended up being with the small hat. In this case, she happened to be with a small hat male. But now, when we talk about feminism, the most known person, the feminist icon, if you will, of and I be getting my waves mixed up, so don't quote me, but this current, not this current, the 60s wave of feminism, that iteration of feminism. I believe it's third wave, but don't quote me. It's Gloria Steinem. Now, first and foremost, all we have to look at her name. Her name is Gloria Steinem. What type of name is Steinem? For those who have been following Brother Irritated Jenny, Warren Horizon, myself, Straight Black Pride, you know that Steinem is a small hat name. Gloria Steinem is an admitted CIA operative. Again, you can look this up. I downloaded the video just in case they took the video away, where she talks about when she's young working for the CIA. She had a project that she wanted to do. She went to look for funding for people like the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation turned her down for the money. Somebody told her, hey, your CIA funds this type of stuff. Check them out. She goes to the CIA. They're like, oh, yeah, cool. Here's the money. But of course, we understand that the CIA, and this was in the late 50s to the early 60s, but we understand that the CIA doesn't just hand you money and not expect anything in return. And in fact, later on, the CIA would go on to fund Ms. Magazine, which became the Feminist Magazine. So they had, her whole career has been funded by the CIA, and then her platform that she created for herself was funded by the CIA, and that whole feminist explosion that came through the late 60s, the early 70s was an all CIA operation. And she, like I said, she admits her being a CIA operative, and even jokes about it in the interview that while she was with the CIA, later on, she would be protesting what the American government was doing and laughs about it. She's like, yeah, that, I know that doesn't seem like a CIA thing to do, but it's how the CIA works. And so that's the roots of Gloria Steinem. And then Gloria Steinem would go on to write articles advocating for Black women to go against Black men and to fight against quote unquote patriarchy in the Black community. Now, understand, this is in the early 70s while the Black Power movement is still going on. And this was not just a thing of her doing this. Robert F. Williams' wife, Mama Mabel Williams, talks about different people coming into the civil rights movement and trying to cause discord between the men and the women, and saying that, hey, now that you got this civil rights thing going, why don't you fight for women's rights? She talks about this. There are other sisters that were around back at that time. They talk about this. And so we see, if we really look at the transition from the civil rights movement into the Black Power movement, then you see the creeping in of the feminist movement to try to disrupt what was taking place, because the Black Power movement was a movement of young people, which means that the European would have to deal with these people for a longer time. And so the only way to disrupt that, other than outright killing and murdering the people, which they did that as well, but to keep it from being something that is sustained generation after generation after generation, is to try to cause discord and mistrust amongst the Black man and the Black woman. And that plan has been played out to this day. And what's deep is, when I saw the whole Gloria Steinem thing, I knew that information. That was not news to me. I knew about her being a CIA. I knew all of that. And I'm gonna go to the article. I'm gonna read the title of the article so you can understand what it said. Gloria Steinem gained prominence as a feminist leader by writing an article on April 4th, 1969, entitled "After Black Power." Now, this is still in the 60s. Black Power is just really rising up. It says, "After Black Power, Women's Liberation." The article encouraged Black women to break away from the civil rights and Black Power movement to focus on their own problems. Now, you can do a YouTube search and you can still find that article. You don't have to take my word for it. Right there, that shows you exactly what the modus operandi and the purpose of Black feminism is in that article right there. Step away from Black rights, Black power, and focus on your own problems. How is white supremacy not the problem? See, at that time, nobody was really using the term white supremacy, so it was easier to pull that off on us. But the problem is people are being disrespected because they're Black. People are being brutalized because they're Black. People are being murdered because they're Black. Their gender doesn't matter. The only difference is that the woman may be raped more than the man, but that doesn't mean the man wasn't raped, because we know that the man was raped during slavery. And what makes you think that they weren't raping men after slavery? Just nobody will talk about it. But so now we see this is the roots of Black feminism, and Gloria Steinem had a Black woman under her tutelage, working with her, and to help spread this type of agenda amongst our people. Now, you see why that's relevant, but you're going to ask, okay, well, that was 40 years ago. How does that affect what's going on now? Well, the thing is, it didn't just stop there. These type of movements, a fifth column doesn't work unless what? Fifth column doesn't work unless the people inside make the agreement. So it's not enough for a white woman to write an article and to take one person under her tutelage and that one person to advocate that philosophy. You have to have others who advocate that philosophy and spread that philosophy. And one of the people I want to talk about, who is a Black feminist icon, who any Black feminist, any type of Black feminist theory, any of that stuff, any queer theory, all that, you cannot go through that stuff without mentioning this person's name. And I'm talking about Audre Lorde. And Audre Lorde, the picture that you see of the Black woman with the afro and a white woman and the flower and all that, that's Audre Lorde. So Audre Lorde, this is what's so deep, man. It's so deep when you really start looking through this stuff and connecting dots. It's insane. Now, Audre Lorde is credited with popularizing the concept of intersectionality. Now, if you ever talk to any feminists, you ever talk to any of these people with this queer stuff and all this, they always talk about intersectionality. And when I first heard the term, I had no idea what it meant, and I did not understand the concept. Because to me, as an African in a race war against Europeans, the only thing I'm trying to intersect is weapons with the bodies of enemies. And so the idea of intersectionality did not make any sense to me. I see our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby, has showed up. Peace to you, sister. And so, but the concept of intersectionality basically is saying that because one group of people is oppressed and another group of people are oppressed, then that oppression affects all of them. So therefore, it intersects, it intercrosses. And so therefore, the oppression of women is the oppression of poor people, is the oppression of Black people is the oppression of people who are disabled, is the oppression of, and so forth and so forth and so on. And this is what you see in movements like Black Lives Matter. That's why the concept is important for you to know, so you can see what you're looking at. Without this concept of intersectionality, they can't rope our women into fighting for everyone else except for the Black family. And this is a key part of this feminist theory. And Audre Lorde is the one who is known for popularizing this theory. Now, here's what's deep about Audre Lorde. In 1962, Audre Lorde married a gay white man, Edwin Rollins, with whom she had 2 children. I'm going to let that marinate for a moment. In fact, I'm going to say it again. Audre Lorde, a Black woman, married a gay white man in order to produce 2 children. That's what's known today as a beard, someone that you pretend to be having a relationship with when one or both of the partners are homosexual. Now, Audre Lorde was known for critiquing white feminists, claiming that they refused to acknowledge their failure to address racism as an outgrowth of patriarchy. So from her mind, it's not that the brother said, what? Yeah, brother. All right. Oh, you can find all this on the internet. I'm not making any of this up. So in her mind, racism, white supremacy was an outgrowth of patriarchy. Not that white supremacy produces the misogyny. You see what I'm saying? So it's a misunderstanding of what's taking place, because they don't understand white supremacy, because they don't understand the 9 areas of people activity. And we're going to do a show on that later on, so we can be clear about what racism, white supremacy is. Later on, Lorde would have a 10-year relationship, a 10-year lesbian relationship, with Frances Clayton, a white woman. That's the woman that's in the picture, in the thumbnail for the show. And then Lorde wrote a poem where she fantasized about having a lesbian relationship with her mother. Again, not making any of this up. All of this is public documentation. I had the same reactions that you're having now when I had to go research the stuff and look at it. When I do the lecture again with all the visual documentation, it'll be recorded and it'll be put out for people to download or purchase. But these are the people who are the mothers of the modern Black feminists that we have to deal with today, who are running things like Black Lives Matter, and we're trying to figure out why in the world they're running around in circles, but this is their origin. And so I was taught that the origin of a thing determines its nature, so I had to go back and study the origin to see what I was looking at. And now it becomes crystal clear what I'm looking at, because I looked at the origin, right? So that's one well-known Black feminist icon that always gets quoted. And in order for you to even talk to these people, you have to know these names and know who these people are. And we're going to deal with another one, and it's going to be interesting, because when you hear it, it's going to almost sound like I'm repeating myself over and over again. Let's take a look at Alice Walker. We all know who Alice Walker is, right? Alice Walker is known for writing the book The Color Purple in 1982. Now, The Color Purple became the movie The Color Purple, which is one of the most famous and influential movies on Black women in the last 40 to 50 years. There are literally 2 movies that sisters looked at from, I'm not even sure what year The Color Purple came out, I believe 86. Color Purple and Waiting to Exhale. Those are like the Bible of Black women over the last 35, 40 years. So, of course, we have to look and say, who in the world is Alice Walker? Take a look at her profile. Alice Walker's award-winning, feminist author. She's a person who coined the term womanist to refer to black feminists or feminists of color, right? Okay, it's nothing extreme there. It's like, all right. But here, where we get to the interesting part. In 1965, Walker married who? A Jewish male, Melvin R. Leventhal, whom she had one child with and divorced in 1976. In 1973, Walker became the editor of Ms. Magazine, which was founded by who? Gloria Steinem. And then Alice Walker would go on to have a lesbian relationship with Tracy Chapman. And y'all, some of y'all may not remember Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman, the black folk singer, Fast Car. That Tracy Chapman. So what's the interesting part in all this? The interesting part is, again, we have another black woman who was married to a small hat, has a baby by a small hat, same cycle, then becomes a lesbian. So we see, if we look at it, Gloria Steinem, small hat, right? Audre Lorde lays up with small hat. Alice Walker lays up with small hat. So we can really see who's the influence behind this stuff by the fact of who are these people laid up with. Now, in the modern context, we just talked about it last week. Alicia Garza, married a female who pretends to be a male, who's a small hat, and was also raised by her stepfather, who is a small hat. So the very roots of feminism is what I call psychological mulattoism, where the mind is white, right? But the body is black. And so they're operating from that white psychology coming into our movements funded by Europeans, specifically small hats, disrupting everything that we're trying to do. And our women fall victim to it, even if they don't subscribe to the ideology consciously. The ideology is affecting them subconsciously because of it's being pushed in the general society. It's no different from the way that misogyny was pushed in the black community through hip hop and black men at the time, and since for 40 years absorbed that psychology of misogyny. And so you see now and who controls the hip hop? Small hat controls the hip hop. And so now we see, again, we're looking at a war that we're fighting amongst ourselves and don't see the hidden hands that are manipulating our minds. So the man is listening to hip hop and becoming a misogynist, a hater of women, which is a European psychology. And the woman becomes a feminist, which is a European psychology. And if you talk to a lot of sisters that have gone to college within the last 15 to 20 years, most of them end up taking some type of gender studies, queer studies, all that type of stuff. And you send your daughter to school to learn something, and she comes back dressed like a man, and you don't know what happened, not realizing that she's taking some class where they're talking about how great Audre Lorde and Alice Walker is and all this stuff, or she come back marrying some European, and you have no idea what in the world is going on. Our wonderful producer said that Gloria Steinem was also dating Henry Kissinger. Man, we already know Henry Kissinger literally wrote playbooks on how to destroy black people. So if you're in the bed with him, we already know what time it is. And so now we can begin to see and study and break down how our enemy is manipulating the mind of our people to fight against each other. And the reason I wanted to do this discussion today, interestingly enough, on Father's Day, because Father's Day I didn't even think about it when I said, oh, this is what I'm going to talk about. Because I was trying to figure out, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? Said, I'll talk about this. Father's Day is always a day of contention because what? In the Black community, 70% of children are born out of wedlock. And we always have the single mothers that say they're mothers and fathers. And then the people say, no, you're not. And you have the back and forth. And that further fuels the gender divide. We don't even see how we're being manipulated. Because if we weren't holding on to these two ideologies, and then because of the economic things that I had talked about in another show, we wouldn't even be at this position to have this divide take place. But again, these people are put amongst us and propped up in our community as icons. Everybody knows, if you're a certain age, who Alice Walker is. And these types of things are never discussed. And then the fact that when you look at the movie, which I've never watched the whole movie, in the movie, and I've never read the book, admittedly, so I can only go by what's in the movie. First of all, the movie was made by Small Hat, directed by Small Hat. Then in the movie, the bad guy is the black man. And all the things that Europeans did during slavery, they embodied it in the black man. Beating the woman, raping women, taking children away. All of that is things that took place during enslavement that Europeans did, but they used the black man and made him the face of it. And planted that in the minds of our women. And then, of course, like I said, later on, implant the ideas of calling our women B's and H's for 40 years in the minds of the men. And what's deep is now we're at a point now where there's the discussion of black men not protecting black women. And it's deep because the European understands something psychologically about men that sisters don't understand, because sisters benefit from it and don't know. Peace, Sister Sandra. And they don't understand that this is man code. Dr. John Henry Clark said one of the things that the European does is he will make fun of something to make you not want to claim it, in essence. I'm paraphrasing. And he talked about, hey, they make fun of your clothes and you change your clothes. They make fun of your religion, you change your religion, and so forth and so on. Well, along the same lines, the same psychology, if the European gets us to make fun and degrade our women, what happens? You don't revere your women. And you don't want to claim your women. So what happens? And I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to have to explain it, but here's what we have to understand. This is man law. This is universal man law, what I'm about to say. That which belongs to no one, or that which belongs to everyone, excuse me, belongs to no one. Right? That which belongs to everyone belongs to no one. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this. When a woman is claimed by a man or a group of people, family, tribe, nation, she falls within that man and that group, tribe, nation's borders, and then is accorded protection. Example, talk about any black man's mama is fighting. At least when I was growing up, is a fight. There's no discussion, straight to the hands, or the guns, or the knives, or whatever's available, right? That's the essential nature of manhood. That to look at the feminine as that which must be protected. But the psychology of it is it only works for what you claim. When for the last 30 years, as black women have been saying, I'm independent, I don't need no man. Black men ain't this, black men ain't that. By saying that, black women have removed their protection to a large extent to the majority of men that are around. And with that being said, the women who, I mean, the men who grow up in the community and they're not around other men aren't taught the protection aspect of their nature, so it manifests in a negative way. So you have concepts now like where you hear a lot of men on the internet talking about she belongs to the streets. What does that mean? Psychologically, what the man is saying is what I said. That which belongs to everyone belongs to no one. It means I'm not claiming this woman, therefore she doesn't fall under my protection. I am telling you, other men, that you can prey upon her. That's really what it's saying. That's an aspect of misogyny that as men we don't catch. But the protective aspect of the contract is really a contract between black men and black women of what black women have to do. Black women don't get. A prime example is when that sister was out there twerking in front of those policemen at the rally and people questioned her on it, she got offended. But if the police had came and tried to rape her and no men did nothing, then she would have said no one tried to protect her. But what's the contract? The contract is if you fall under the borders of a man or group of men, part of the contract is following their guidance. I can't protect you if you refuse to follow guidance. But it's the feminist mindset that says I'm superior to the man, both intellectually and every other aspect. Therefore, his guidance isn't needed. But then when you don't follow the man's guidance, what? Destruction comes, and then you blame who? The man, instead of blaming who? You have to blame yourself and the European who taught you the concept. Because you always hear sisters talking about they don't need a man until they need somebody to remove a refrigerator or fix a car, all the other things that goes on. Then they call in somebody. And then you have those women who have multiple men for multiple tasks. But the problem is you don't fall under the jurisdiction of any of those men, so you don't fall under the protection of any of those men. And so this mentality leaves our women unprotected. The mentality that affects the men and the mentality that affects the women. And so then the European knows that, so then he can do something to our women, or a Negro knows it in his mind, so they'll do something to our women, now knowing there'll be no or thinking there'll be no repercussions. You see how this works? I'll give you a prime example. Somewhere in DC, and I just saw this, some Negroes, for whatever reason, and I don't know the story behind it, I haven't researched it because I was so shocked when I saw it, I just couldn't even fathom what was going on. For whatever reason, picked up a sister and threw her in a trash dumpster. And other men were apparently there. Now, I don't know the story. I don't know what she did, but whatever it is, it doesn't justify that, so it doesn't actually matter. But the fact that, not that it would happen, but the fact that there are other men there that will watch, and the fact that whoever she's related to hasn't gone and shot up that block yet, from what I heard, shows us the psychology of the men of this generation, how they've been inculcated with the idea of misogyny for so long that they don't even consider Black women their women, between the independent Black woman and the psychology of misogyny. The sister said the Black man is the king of his castle. Why would you treat him as any less? Sister, that's a sister discussion to have with sisters. A lot of sisters don't see it that way. Why? Because they didn't grow up with a father. One of the things that takes place, though, that we don't talk about is many sisters, we always hear about the men who have left women and had multiple children with multiple women. We understand that. That's real. Part of that is the psychology of the man wanting to prove his manhood through reproduction and having sex with multiple women because he doesn't feel he can express his manhood in other areas of people activity, as Dr. Wilson would say. So he doesn't feel like he can express his manhood through, let's say, the business arena, or that he can just roll on some euros and smack him and express his manhood that way. So men are too scared for that. So they try to manifest it in another way to prove their manhood. But what is the responsibility of the woman in that situation? I've seen situations where sisters will know a dude got 5 children by 4 different women. Now, he's obviously doesn't have the economic means to take care of what he has produced thus far. And yet they'll come right behind that and add on 1 and 1 and be part of that line. What is it in the mind of the Black woman to do that? How does that benefit the community? It doesn't benefit the community. What type of self-esteem issue would a woman have to have in order to add on to try to have a child by a person who has proven to have failed at being a father? What's the guy's name? Future, the rapper? He's a perfect example of this. It seems like every time I look up, he's having another child. No one has, from my understanding, all the complaints about him, he has shown no proclivity for raising his children. And yet women chase behind him like he is literally the greatest man on earth. Now somebody's gonna say, "Oh, you hating on him?" No, I'm just exploring the psychology that makes these things possible in our community, which causes us to not be able to come together and nation build. Because what happens after that? What happens is women, even though women are the ones volunteering to reproduce with a person who's proven to not be father material, will sit around and point to him as an example of Black men not doing what they're supposed to do. As if sisters haven't volunteered. After the first 1 or 2, everybody after that is, who can they blame but themselves? He's a public persona. It's not like this is just some regular Joe Blow around the corner. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows what he does. And yet women still sign up for it. And then blame men, Black men, for what takes place. But part of that is another aspect of feminism that no one wants to talk about, which is the glorification of whore culture. I'm going to say it again. People can get mad, you can leave the chat, but we got to talk about it today. We have to talk about the glorification of whore culture, especially amongst our young women. Who is one of the most popular young rappers out today? Well, she's not even young, but rappers out today. Cardi B. Who else? City Girls. These, now I'm trying not to be disrespectful. These women, happy Father's Day, brother. These women, Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, City Girls, have become icons in the Black female community, not just amongst young people. I was talking to a brother. He was talking about his sister, who I believe in her 50s, is running around singing a City Girl song. Now, what imagery are they projecting into the minds of our women? And then, of course, what is the result? They're projecting to the minds of our women that being, quote unquote, a whore or a hoe is something positive and beneficial. Cardi B was known, she had a song where I believe the chorus is, I F them and then I get some money. Literally, this is the definition of whoredom. And that's part of her song. She's saying this is a positive. I F them and then I get some money. And then our children, our young daughters are sitting around listening to this and repeating it because we know how it goes. Children can barely remember the ABCs, but they can tell you every verse on a rap song. I know because I used to be one of those children, but I did know my ABCs. But I knew all the words to songs that I shouldn't have been listening to then, so I know how it goes. And really, the manifestation of this in hip hop really all began, with Little Kim. And I remember the iconography that they used with her with the bikini on and her legs spread wide open. And they put that big giant poster, and this how old it is. It used to be at the record stores. And it was a mall that I used to go to. When as soon as you walk in the mall, the record store was to the left, and that poster was posted up there. These new women, the Cardi B's, the Nicki Minaj's, City Girl, Megan Thee Stallion, all of them are the psychological daughters of Little Kim. But when you look at the psychology of Little Kim, you see the manifestation of self-hatred, where she has had so much surgery that she has disfigured herself in an effort to not look like herself, to the point where she's virtually unrecognizable. This is the the physical manifestation of the psychology of self-hatred that's in the mind of Little Kim. And that's no disrespect to this sister, but it is what it is. She talks about her low self-esteem. She talked about feeling like she was too dark. Little Kim's not even brown skinned, or she wasn't when she was young. She was light brown. And yes, she talked about feeling like she was too dark and all these things. And I believe that she suffered from the psychology of trying to compete for Biggie's attention with Faith Evans, who was a mulatto. So you black trying to compete with somebody that's not black. You see how we get caught up in this stuff? And now that stuff has been projected now to another generation, where Nicki Minaj came out with the fake everything, looking like what? A transgender. And so Nicki Minaj, when she came out with all the surgery and the fake hair and the this and that or whatever, literally helped transform our women to what I call now they wear the tranny uniform. And so we see that the feminism, the lesbianism, and the transgenderism all being pushed and promoted through the female hip hop, and they're probably not even aware of what's going on, no more than some of these Negroes that was talking all that nonsense back in the 90s about shooting other black people all the time had any idea what was going on there. And the small hat laughs not only to the bank, but he laughs as he takes us to the morgue and buries us in the ground. Black feminism, white supremacy's fifth column, being projected into the minds of our sisters through the hip hop that destroyed us as men a generation earlier. Europeans don't change the playbook when the plays work. And so, and what makes it worse is that people like Cardi B, she has a man. I believe, I know I saw her pregnant at one time. I don't know if she had a baby. I don't follow her like that. And I saw her performing with her legs all wide open when she was pregnant. And so she's giving the projection that I can be a stripper, a whore, I can talk bad about men and still get a black man, and I'm not even black, and have a baby by him, and he's rich. So suddenly she becomes an icon to our women, and she's not even of our women. But she's pushing what? She's pushing the small hat agenda of feminism through her music and her actions on a day-to-day basis. And here we are getting caught up in another cycle of death and destruction. Cindy says Cardi B has a little girl. There it is. Another generation. And so we see now how these things are being pushed through the music and the media. But again, let's go back to the Black Lives Matter and that whole agenda where we look at Straight Black Pride. We had researched it 4 or 5 years ago, put it out, where all their discussion was about queering the movement, right? Which is what? That's the intersectionality that Audre Lorde talked about 30, 40 years ago. So they're carrying out that agenda that was put out decades ago that we weren't even paying attention to. And then there was another white feminist who talked about, in essence, if you look at it, and I have the clip in my lecture, she basically talks about how the second part of the feminist revolution is the effeminization of men. So this is why, when you look at it, the feminists always advocate for what? The homosexual black male, and always denigrate who? The heterosexual straight black male. And then they use instances of people that they think are heterosexual doing certain things. For example, they talk about R. Kelly, but R. Kelly, we know, is what? A homosexual and a what? Pedophile, meaning he's a what? Homophile. The brother that, well, excuse me, not the brother, that demon that murdered that young sister down in Florida that was a Black Lives activist, the sister was like, I believe, 18, 19 years old. And whatever type of way he found her, raped and murdered her, they're going to say, oh, he's a straight man. Straight men don't rape women. And the fact that he would target a sister that young when he's probably my age means that he's a damn pedophile. Excuse my language. Whenever I even talk about these people, it makes me want to rip somebody's head clean off of their shoulders. Said the sister was 19. Sister was 19. And that whole, I just read that whole case. I couldn't even post about it because I didn't want to write something that, you know, I didn't want to write something to have FBI knocking down my door. Because I couldn't even fathom the concept of how this could happen. But again, what's going to have to take place, the discussion we're going to have amongst black men and black women, we're going to have a meeting of the minds and they're coming together and admitting a fault on both sides. But also we're going to have to accept the fact that we have to disabuse ourselves of these European ideologies. The misogyny and the black feminism. I'm talking about the black feminism today because the black feminism is at the root of the Black Lives Matter movement. And you're going to see and in fact, you already see it. You see the LGBT Black Lives Matter flags and things going up. And there have been attacks by members of Black Lives Matter against members of Straight Black Pride. As far as in the media and people claim, there was a young sister. This is about 2 or 3 years ago. Claimed that somebody from Straight Black Pride had attacked her. Now, as a member of Straight Black Pride at that time, I knew everyone that was in Straight Black Pride, regardless of city. But they had put out that propaganda in order to paint us as what? Misogynists and beaters of women. Why? So they can tie straight men and tie the idea of Black family into abuse, and tie the idea of masculinity, Black masculinity, as something that's negative. And so they come out talking about toxic masculinity. But nobody talks about Cardi B and calls that toxic femininity, which it is. But they claim that a man wanting to defend his woman, that's toxic masculinity. But then when something happens to a sister, where were the men at? Is the first question that's asked. But again, what did I say? The psychology of the man is that which falls within his borders, is that which is protected. You can't say, I'm not a part of you, I'm not a part of you, I'm not a part of you, and then say, where's the protection? It doesn't work that way. Why? Because as a man, I can tell you this from my experience. I've known brothers who have died because of a Black woman playing games and playing both sides and dealing with two brothers. And one is dead and one is in jail. And these were young brothers. One of them with a bright future. I've seen the consequences of sisters playing these types of games. And so this stuff, this protection that women ask for, they don't understand the nature of what they're asking for. Because when a man puts you under his protection, that means he's putting his life on the line. That if something happens to you, somebody got to die. That's what a sister's asking for when she asks for protection. So when you say it, you better understand what you're saying, and you better be able to raise some bail money for the brother or get him a lawyer, because he's not playing if he's a man. That's why what's so dangerous about the whore culture aspect of the feminism. Because if you get two brothers who think that this woman, who, as they say, belongs to everybody, is your woman, you're going to have conflict. That's why one of my rules as a man is I hang around brothers who we're not even attracted to the same type of women. So we can have disagreements, but we'll never have conflict. Because they won't even find the type of woman I like as attractive as I find them, and vice versa. These are the types of rules and guidelines that men set amongst themselves that women don't even know about, in order for us to avoid getting caught up in something that is destructive by nature of the woman. Because a man's nature is order. The woman's nature, to a degree, is chaos. They balance each other out, because that chaos helps bring about creativity. But because we've been confused about our gender roles, we don't realize what we're supposed to be doing. The sister said, as you stated earlier, we have to get away from white culture and spread knowledge of our African culture. That's facts, sisters. And so one of the things that, speaking of that, in African society, we had a men's council and a women's council, and then they came together to make rules for the society. And the elders held a higher position than the warrior class, which held a higher position than the youth. These are the types of things that, as we try to build organizations and rebuild our societies, we have to go back to the traditional model and move away from the European conception of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman, and go back to being Africans, male and female, which is what? A complementarity or complementary relationship, as opposed to the European concept of man and woman, which is an antagonistic relationship. But we're following the European model because we're following the European ideologies. And many people don't realize, like I said, because many sisters exhibit feminist traits without even ascribing to the feminist ideology, because it's so it permeates the atmosphere so much that you can fall into it without realizing it. And so many of our women now have become so masculinized in the same manner that the men have become effeminized that they don't even realize that they're not within their feminine energy. And the sister says, do you think we had something similar to that back before integration? I'll say before integration, due to the fact that you didn't have as much mass media, you didn't have, we weren't as influenced by them outside of the Bible because we were away from them. That is something and the fact that you couldn't escape from each other. That's what allowed our relationships to thrive more. But we've still been affected by the slave making process. And so we still weren't to the level that we needed to be at collectively. So we were in a better position then because one of the reasons we didn't have other options like now. One of the main problems in the whole dating sphere, excuse me, that we have going on now is everybody thinks they have options to every person that they see everywhere on the internet and in real life. And so then people, if you always think that there's something better or there's a possibility of something better, that ruins your relationships. But you have to accept the feminist psychology of horror culture in order to even be interested in that. To think that there's someone else available. Because as you chase that someone else, what happens? You start being with more men and more men and more men and more men and more men. And then what happens is because there's a chemical in women's brains that bonds them to men, as women get with more and more men, that chemical in essence burns out. And then women don't even have the ability to bond with men. And that's why you see some sisters that are just out there, for lack of a better word. And they're chasing a chemical high of bonding with a man, but they no longer even have the capacity in their brain to produce the chemical. And so they get burnt out, become bitter, and then what? We're back to the men ain't you know what discussion. Because they don't even understand their brain chemical makeup. That's why in African societies, that's why chastity is so much valued, because one, the effects on a woman's brain when she's not chaste, and two, the destruction that it can cause between men, and the breakdown of the family, which of course the breakdown of the family is to break down the whole society. And Europeans understood this, and that's why they would do what? Rape our women systematically, rape them as young as they could. So to say, what books do you recommend men and women can read to help us get back to African society? I would recommend virtually everything by Baba Walimu Baruti. When it comes to African society, African culture, I would also recommend reading Marimba Ani, John Henry Clark, and Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakinen. If you read their works and you look at their lectures, you'll have an extremely strong foundation. In fact, Baba Baruti and his wife, Mama Iniya, they actually have classes that they recorded on disc, and you could get information there. They have classes for men and classes for women. In fact, the sister, she's not here today, but she just took they had a online class dealing with women's security, and she just took that, and she said that she found that very good. I believe that was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. So yeah, those are the people I would recommend. Baba Baruti, Mama Marimba Ani, Dr. John Henry Clark, um, Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakinen. Um, I think that's everybody that I said, and there are others, but to get a good start, and they have a plethora of information. Barbara Rudy has, I may have maybe a dozen of his books in my library, maybe more. Um, so those types of tools are definitely necessary. His the best book that I read from him was Iwa, a Warrior's Character, and it's a book that really talks about character development and how a man should carry himself and think and move amongst this society, knowing that we're behind enemy lines, and how to try to get yourself back to your African mind as not just as a black man, but as an African in general. So that was one of my favorite books because that Sister Philly eBay said Amos Wilson. Yeah, Amos Wilson is absolutely necessary. I mean, Amos Wilson really one of the most profound thinkers um, ever. And I'll put it like this: I think Dr. John Henry Clark said that Amos Wilson had the type of mind that doesn't even come around, but maybe once every generation. And John Henry Clark, one of our greatest scholars ever. So, the sister said, "Can you send me a list and I'll put it in the description later?" Absolutely. And the sister says, particularly falsification of African consciousness. Absolutely. Everything Baba Amos wrote. I think I have it all. I actually went to Brooklyn to meet with the brother that's in charge of his books and everything like that. That African World is African. I don't want to misquote. I believe it's African World Info Systems that publishes the books. But I went and met that brother in Brooklyn one time. But so yeah, all of those scholars are phenomenal. But I want to get deeper into this feminism, but I do have an event I'm supposed to be attending. But one thing I want to do, and y'all can tell me in the chat while I'm bringing it up. One thing I want to do is this is something I want to do live. The whole Corona thing has, of course, disrupted everything. I want to do it live too, but I want to have a discussion on here between black men and black women, and I want to have it two different discussions. I want to have one discussion with black men and black women who are single, and then another one with black men and black women who are married. And I want to have everyone on. We had, in essence, a panel discussion, two men, two women, and just talk about some of the different issues and things that are going on in our community. If y'all think that's a good idea, give me a black fist or yeah or whatever, something in the affirmative. And if not, that's something that I will table. Also, sometime in the future, depending on, of course, this whole Corona thing, I want to also do that type of discussion live with a studio audience, so audience can excuse me, answer questions and interact with a live audience. All right, we have one person that says they're down for the singles panel. I will definitely take note of that. And sister says African World Info Systems. Thank you, sister. I was struggling there for a minute. But that is my idea going forward with trying to heal the wounds and bridge the gaps in our community. The sisters have said that they're down for it and down for, okay, all right, everyone pretty much is advocating that idea. That's something I would try to do pushing forward. I just feel like we have to those of you who listen to me know, and those of you who follow me on social media know, I always like to get to the historical root of an event that we're seeing currently, because once we see the origin of it, then we can react properly to what we're seeing. Sometimes we can see what it is now and not see it properly and get caught up in it. And so you see many of our people that advocating for the Black Lives Matter thing because they don't know the origin of it. Then when people start to find the origin of it, they kind of move back. Be like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that this is what this was about. So I wanted to go into a little detail of some of the origin of feminism, so that sisters specifically can take to another sister and say, hey, check this out. This is what's really going on. This is what this is really about. You might want to take a look at it. Now, the people can either accept or reject it. The information is public that I put here on this platform. People can do the research, further research for themselves, but you can't debunk it because it's actual fact. So with that, brothers and sisters, I'm going to close out this episode of the Center Live. I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for supporting. Again, you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical, the numeral 1. Also on Twitter at dc_radical_ONE. That's on Twitter at dc_radical_ONE. Again, I am your host, DC Radical 1. With that, I say a BB for Hodier and straight black pride.